Welcome to the Deep Dive Books channel, where we hope you find something valuable every day.
Today, we're discussing a book that's not brand new, but too good to skip, The Dawn of Everything. Its English version hit shelves in 2021. The authors, anthropologist David Graeber and archaeologist David Wengrow. David Graeber's a standout, a brilliant mind. You might know his hits: Bullshit Jobs, The Utopia of Rules and Debt, The First 5,000 Years. Each one's a total standout. Graeber taught at Yale until they booted him for joining Occupy Wall Street. He moved to the University of London. Tragically, he died in September 2020 from COVID complications, just after finishing The Dawn of Everything. The Dawn of Everything ensures Graeber's legacy. Every page sparks discussion with fresh ideas. I read it, quietly thrilled. We live in an era of big archaeological finds. And that Graeber wrote it down. The book covers 30,000 years of human society, zooming in on the pre-agricultural era. Why should you care about that time? Imagine you work in a government office. One day, a new boss takes over, wipes out the old team, and everyone panics. Some think it's the end of the world. But if you've read some history, you'd know this is normal. Maybe you even saw it coming, so it doesn't hit you hard. Knowing more keeps you calm and gives you options. History isn't about accepting the world as it is. It's about imagining what else could be. If you've studied China's 24 histories, like Mao Zedong, you'd get real political struggles. Add some economic, social, and institutional history, and you'd see why people back then made certain choices. Things aren't just about good versus evil or us versus them. Reading world history shows you other ways to live, freeing your mind. Maybe there are better solutions out there for the same problems. Too bad we can't read alien history for even more ideas. At least we'd have something to hope for, even if we can't live it yet. Good news. Recent archaeology worldwide is revealing more about our past. Written history only goes back a few thousand years, but Homo sapiens have had modern brains for over 100,000 years. How did people live before that? The Dawn of Everything will blow your mind. You've probably noticed ancient Chinese scholars always thought the past was better. Like the golden age of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. Confucius idolized the Duke of Zhou. Laozi and Han Fei praised the ancient times as perfect. Zhuangzi paints early humans as near saints or gods. Later, after the Qin system took over, people started treating Confucius and Mencius as saints too. I used to think this was just old-fashioned nonsense. Distance makes things look prettier, and they couldn't imagine a better future. Now, I think they might have been onto something. A better society might be possible. In the late 19th century, during the Qing dynasty, China opened up to the West. Officials visiting Europe were stunned by parliamentary debates, government charity, rule of law, and social harmony. They weren't as impressed by Western tech. They admired the beauty of their politics and culture instead. Sure, distance played a role, but Western political civilization was ahead of Qing China back then. So where did that come from? At least trace it back to the Enlightenment in the 17th century. But why did Europe have an Enlightenment? China actually helped. European missionaries admired China's exam system for picking officials. Later, thanks to scientist Leibniz, some European countries started using exams for bureaucrats in the 18th century. But Enlightenment ideas like reason, rights, law, and social contracts? Those didn't come from China. Nor from Christianity. Graeber and Wengrow argue, with tons of evidence, that they came from people more like China's ancient sages. North America's indigenous peoples. From the late 15th century, especially after Spain conquered the Americas, Europeans got to see how indigenous peoples lived. Yes, Europeans eventually conquered or wiped them out, but it took time. There were conflicts, diplomacy, Jesuit missionaries, language exchanges. Sometimes even friendly, deep interactions. These encounters didn't make indigenous people ditch their identity. Instead, they shook up European thinkers. Not one indigenous person thought Europe was superior and they were backward. For example, sometimes indigenous groups adopted European kids, or Europeans took in indigenous ones. When those kids grew up and could choose where to live, they almost always picked the indigenous way. There's plenty of evidence. One white girl, kidnapped by indigenous people, lived happily and married twice. She tried Western life briefly, but went back. Benjamin Franklin wrote about this vividly. An indigenous kid raised by us would visit family once and never return. A white kid raised indigenous came back, inherited wealth, but gave it to his brother, took a gun and cloak, and left for the wilderness. Franklin said it's not just their nature. It's human nature. What made indigenous life so appealing? Missionaries living with indigenous communities noticed one thing right away: kindness and mutual help. Indigenous people had strong social bonds and cared deeply for each other. They'd never let someone go hungry or poor. It was morally unthinkable to them. Take the Wyandot, who lived around the Great Lakes in what's now the US and Canada. In the 17th century, that was French territory. When the Wyandot heard France had beggars, they were furious and scolded the French. How can you treat your own people like that? Here, in towns or villages, we help each other. No one's a beggar. The French had no comeback. But don't think the Wyandot were just naive do-gooders. That's underestimating them. They had no government, king, or written laws, but they understood politics. They valued freedom, equality, and democracy. Their communities held open debates. They had politicians. Almost every Wyandot could argue fluently, with wit and politeness. Top-tier debating skills. They even looked down on the French. French settlers would bicker, interrupt, and ramble weakly, clearly unrefined. The Wyandot? Even colonists admitted they excelled in speeches, trade, etiquette, and cleverness, outshining France's sharpest citizens and merchants. Even a general planning their genocide said their powerful speeches brought tears. These were presidential campaign-level orations. Logical, emotional, poetic, with proverbs, satire, and humor. Their intellect outmatched the Europeans. One standout Wyandot leader from the 17th century was Kandiaronk, a hero, brilliant ruler, and master of global politics, including the West. He juggled Britain, France, and local tribes, aiming to unite indigenous folks against colonizers. Kandiaronk was a negotiation genius, nailing European logic, interests, and blind spots, running circles around them. His rivals called him a natural orator no one could outsmart. His talks were so lively and wise that people loved listening. Canada's governor often invited him to dinner, where officials would poke him with questions just to hear him speak. In the 1680s, Kandiaronk toured Europe, gave interviews, and sparked a sensation with a book of his thoughts. He called Europe barbaric. Your kings hold all the power, doing whatever they want with people. Your rich get more respect than the poor. What kind of life is that? In debates, Europeans admitted the Wyandot had little crime despite no laws, and while they had wealth gaps, no one turned riches into dominance. If Confucius, Mencius, or Zhuangzi saw Wyandot life, and heard Kandiaronk, they'd say, "This is the ideal society, these are the sages." The French, stumped, said, "But our material progress must count for something, right?" Kandiaronk's reply hit hard. Here's the raw quote. "Do you seriously imagine," he says, "that I would be happy to live like one of the inhabitants of Paris, to take 2 hours every morning just to put on my shirt and makeup, to bow and scrape before every obnoxious galit I meet on the street, who happen to have been born with an inheritance? Do you really imagine I could carry a purse full of coins, and not immediately hand them over to people who are hungry? That I would carry a sword but not immediately draw it on the first band of thugs I see rounding up the destitute to press them into naval service?" Europe's intellectuals couldn't sit still. They thought they were the pinnacle of civilization, but now indigenous societies seemed more advanced. What does that say about us? Europe didn't even have a concept of equality before. No one asked why inequality existed. It was just how things were. Indigenous Americans woke them up. Inequality is barbaric. Thinkers had to explain. If equality is natural, why aren't we equal? That's what led to Jean-Jacques Rousseau's On Discourse on the Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men. Rousseau said, yes, prehistoric humans were equal, living in small, isolated groups with no oppression. But once language and society formed in the Stone Age, inequality crept in. Then agriculture, metalworking, and complex civilization brought classes and even more disparity. Later folks said Rousseau championed equality. Back then, people thought he saved Europe's pride and soothed their egos. His ideas echoed the Bible's Eden fall, so they caught on fast. Scholars tweaked his framework. Some blamed agriculture, others cities or labor division. The gist? Inequality comes with complex society. Want a fancy world? Deal with inequality. But the dawn of everything proves Rousseau's logic wrong. We'll get into that later. Let's clear this up. Indigenous Americans and prehistoric people everywhere weren't dumb, but they weren't saintly either. The Wyandot could be brutal. Captives got two choices: join us or die horribly. That was just for prisoners, though. What shocked them most was the French whipping or killing their own people. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.